Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be bringing you another one of my 5 book recommendations within a certain genre or theme videos, and today I'm going to be giving you 5 poetry collection recommendations. So over the past year or so, I've got quite into reading poetry. I didn't read so much before then, but now I read quite a lot. So the 5 I'm going to be recommending you today are some of the best that I have found. Also, I would say that any of these poetry collections are good for anyone really, even if you don't read much poetry. There are definitely some that are more accessible than others, and I'll tell you which ones they are. But really, if you're interested in any of these, then just go ahead and read them. As a bonus in this video, I am going to be reading you a poem or a snippet from a poem from each of the collections that I recommend, just so that you can get a sense of what the collection might be like and to see whether you'll like it or not. Hopefully I don't mess up reading the poems too much and put you off completely. So the first book that I'm going to recommend today is probably my favourite poetry collection ever, and that is Spacecraft by John McCullough. So this is a contemporary poetry collection that discusses many aspects of life and love and human relationships, most prominently the author's relationship with his first partner and his death from an age-related illness. This collection is comprised of basically every element that I think makes a wonderful poetry collection. So it has such emotional depth and cleverly intricate wordplay, it has discussion of really important contemporary topics, it has wonderful imagery, and it also has really great and perceptive insight into human interactions. If you love contemporary poetry and you haven't read this collection yet, then you absolutely must. It's just so delicious to read. There are so many layers of meaning to the poems, and it's soft but striking and subtle but powerful. I just think it's amazing. So the poem that I'm going to read from this one is called Rooms, and it's one of my absolute favourites from the collection. So it goes like this. There it was again, the softness of your voice, the cushioned spaces of its hesitance, that constant search for the right way to question yourself. We'd met on Hove Prom by luck. You talked and I rested in your little rooms. So much sky, so many wanderers we were already in a dream. Now I walk past beach huts, backwash, with no chance of stumbling into you again. There is only the silence of clouds, the air between shuffled pebbles, the gaps I listen for inside the rain. Stunning. The next book that I'm going to recommend is another contemporary poetry collection, and that one is Stranger Baby by Emily Berry. This collection most primarily explores themes of childhood loss and grief and longing, and so as you can imagine, it is an extremely raw and emotionally impactful collection. The poems in here are quite clear and accessible, but that doesn't mean that it lacks in any beauty or depth of meaning. There are actually moments in this collection of stunning wordplay and imagery. Emily Berry uses a lot of natural imagery in her poems, water imagery most primarily. So there's a lot of imagery of the sea and the ocean and tears, and these really give the poems a sense of fluidity and movement, and the rhythm of the poems also mirrors this perfectly as well. I'm really keen to read more poetry by Emily Berry after reading this. I think she's great. And the poem I'm going to read for you is actually the final poem, and I think it's the best. So it's called Canopy, and it goes like this. The weather was inside. The branches trembled over the glass as if to apologise, then they thumped and they came in. And the trees shook everything off until they were bare and clean. They held onto the ground with their long feet and leant into the gale and back again. This was their way with the wind. They flung us down and flailed above us with their visions and their pale tree light. I think they were telling us to survive. That's what a leaf feels like anyway. We lay under their great awry display and they tattooed us with light. They got us inside and made us speak. I said my first word in their language, canopy. I was crying and it felt like I was feeding. Be my mother, I said to the trees, in the language of trees, which can't be transcribed. And they shook their hair back and they bent low with their many arms, and they looked into my eyes as only trees can look into the eyes of persons. They touched me with the rain on their fingers till I was all droplets, till I was mist, and they said they would. The next one I'm going to recommend today is another absolute favourite of mine, and that is And Still I Rise by Maya Angelou. So this poetry collection was written a bit longer ago. It was written in the 1970s, and it is one of the poetry collections by Maya Angelou, who is, of course, the famous author of her memoir, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Like in her memoirs, this collection depicts Maya Angelou's life as she overcame poverty and racism and violence, But this collection in particular also explores many other themes, such as sex and slavery, romantic relationships, and motherhood as well. Maya Angelou writes every poem in this collection with such passion. She's so courageous but graceful, and she's wise but witty at the same time. She's just amazing, and she definitely uses really stunning imagery to kind of get her points across as well. This poetry collection is perfect for everyone. Whether or not you read a lot of poetry, you should definitely pick this one up. It's just so powerful and inspiring, and I think we can all learn something from it. So the poem I'm going to read you from this collection has to be Caged Bird. So it goes like this. A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends and dips his wing in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade wind soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on the dawn-bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams, his shadow shouts on a nightmare scream, his wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The next book that I'm going to recommend is one that I actually read really recently for Booktubeathon, and I really enjoyed it, and that is Seamus Heaney's Human Chain. So I love any book that looks at the different relationships we can have with people, especially familial relationships, and how unendingly complex they are, and I think those themes work really well in poetry, so this collection was basically perfect for me. This collection is about different human relationships and the past and the present and the passing of time and interconnectedness and continuity, and just lots of really interesting things. So the poems in this collection are quite standard, I would say. If you think of poetry, then you probably think of something like this. So it's very clear and easy to read, and there's lots of lovely imagery and a good rhythm to the poems, and the poems differ in length from a few lines long to a few pages long, so there's quite a good mix. I know that Seamus Heaney is actually a very well-loved poet, and I believe this is actually his 12th poetry collection, so I'm really looking forward to reading more by him in the future. So I'm going to read you a snippet of a poem called A Herbal, and I think it sums up the collection quite well. So I'll read you this bit. If you know a bit about the universe, it's because you've taken it in like that. Looked as hard as you look into yourself, into the rat hole through the vetch and dock that mantled it. Because you've laid your cheek against the rush clump and known soft stone to break on the quarry floor. Between heather and marigold, between spanum and buttercup, between dandelion and broom, between forget-me-not and honeysuckle, as between clear blue and cloud, between haystack and sunset sky, between oak tree and slated roof, I had my existence, I was there, me in place and the place in me. Where can it be found again? An elsewhere world, beyond maps and atlases, where all is woven into and of itself, like a nest of cross-hatched grass blades. And the final collection I'm going to recommend today is one that I absolutely love, and it's one that actually encouraged me to read more poetry, and that is The World's Wife by Carol Ann Duffy. So this collection has one of the coolest and most unique premises of a poetry collection that I've ever read. So Carol Ann Duffy retells the stories of famous men from history and mythical figures, but all from the perspective of the women at the time. So instead of King Kong, we get to hear from Queen Kong. Instead of Darwin, we get to hear from his wife, and so on. This collection is just so clever and quick-witted and entertaining, and it just sparkles while you read it. But of course, it is also full of deeper themes such as innocence and independence, oppression, and also female beauty standards. When reading this collection, you will go from laughing out loud to feeling deeply uncomfortable to feeling extremely sad to laughing out loud again. I just think it's so brilliant and so many people would enjoy it. So I'm going to read you a little bit of my favourite poem in the collection, and that is Little Red Cap, which is of course the story of Little Red Riding Hood and the Big Bad Wolf. He stood in a clearing, reading his verse out loud in his wolfy drawl, a paperback in his hairy paw, red wine staining his bearded jaw. What big ears he had, what big eyes he had, what teeth. In the interval, I made quite sure he spotted me. Sweet 16, never been. Babe, waif, and bought me a drink, my first. You might ask why. Here's why. Poetry. The wolf I knew would lead me deep into the woods, away from home, to a dark, tangled, thorny place, lit by the eyes of owls. I cradled in his wake, my stockings ripped to shreds, scraps of red from my blazer, snagged on a twig and branch, murder clues. I lost both shoes, but got there, wolf's lair, better beware. Lesson 1 that night, breath of the wolf in my ear, was the love poem. I clung till dawn in his thrashing fur, for what little girl doesn't dearly love a wolf? Then I slid from between his heavy matted paws and went in search of a living bird, white dove, which flew straight from my hands into his open mouth. One bite, dead. How nice, breakfast in bed, he said, licking his chops. So there you go, guys. Those are 5 of my poetry collection recommendations. I really hope you enjoyed this video and some of the collection sparked your interest. And I hope it helped that I read out some of the poems. If it didn't, then I hope it was even slightly fun. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. I hope for those of you who asked for a poetry recommendations video in this series that it was okay. And if anyone else has any requests for videos in this series, then I would be happy to take them. Thanks again, guys. I hope you're all doing really well and are all having really nice weeks. And I'll see you next week with my next video. Bye.